Right, okay, we're going to kick off the afternoon shenanigans. So in a moment we will hear from some of my DfT colleagues who will come up and give you a few minutes about work that they're, not just DfT, government colleagues, things they're working on. And they'll stay on the stage after they've presented, and then we'll have a bit of a panel discussion, opportunity for you to ask questions about what they have talked about, what they haven't talked about. But first of all, having built this up to Mission Impossible 7 standards, this is the video that you were promised earlier, which Paul says is 2 clicks away, so let's find that out. Well, that one didn't work. There we go. You have to press hard.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to UK Pavilion.
Really excited about hosting the ITS World Congress in Birmingham in 2027.
Indeed. Right, okay, well, whilst you recover from that, I'll just mention, restate actually some bits and pieces in terms of activity in 2025, things for the diary, some of which we mentioned earlier. So probably the most important one, which is for everyone here, and definitely everyone here, is the May conference, so the TTF conference next May, 6th to 8th of May 2025. It'll be at the same place as we were at 6 months ago, the Leonardo Hinckley Island Hotel, which is in Leicestershire. Public sector places at that are funded, so please do come, whether you're in the public or private sector. It says here bookings will be open from 19th, so that's next Tuesday. So you can go to the TTF website to find out information about that. As I think a few people mentioned, the next ITS European Congress is in Seville. And the request for papers, I might just add one little footnote to what Paula said earlier on. Don't get kind of too put off by the idea, submitting a paper is some sort of academic process. It is partly, it's a kind of learned conference where people will share deep technical findings from research, but it's also an opportunity to talk about real-world stuff you're doing. So it's an opportunity to showcase what you're doing, and you can only do that by being there. And there are a lot of the opportunities that are taken at congresses like that are to share important work programs or achievements you've made in delivering something that's having real change on the ground. So if there is something you want to show off about, what's wrong with going to Seville to do it? So think about that. That's next May. The World Congress is in Atlanta. I asked the people who organised it when we were in Dubai what the weather was going to be like in Atlanta in August, and they said brutal. So if that doesn't attract you, I don't know what will. And then finally, the Elcrig Innovation and Learning Festival, which will be at the beginning of July. So just hold that in your minds. That'll be at the Stoneleigh Showground in Warwickshire, which I've been to. It's very good. And it says here, enhanced transport technology focus with CPD technical training sessions, live demos, TTF working group live demos, so it'll be opportunity for the working groups to kind of show a bit of what they're up to. Again, public sector places will be fully funded, and again, bookings are open from the 19th of November, next Tuesday. In that case, visit the Elcrig website, but I'm sure there's maximum interoperability between TTF and Elcrig websites. I say that with no knowledge, just confidence and optimism. Right, so we're going to move into the afternoon session now, where colleagues are going to come up, they're going to talk for a bit, they'll then stay here and we'll have a panel discussion. And I'm reading them out in the order that's on this piece of paper, so hopefully this is the order they're expecting. First of all, my colleague from DfT, Matt Coleman, who's the head of data policy at DfT, is coming to speak to you. Matt.
Just get the slides. Right, thank you, Anthony. Yes, my name is Matt Coleman. I'm head of data policy at DfT. Some of you may remember me from last year when I talked about all the various stuff that we were going to do, and then there was a new government, and it's all changed. But, well, some of it has, but not all of it. So there's lots going on in the data space, within the department and also outside the department. And I thought today I'll just talk about the TDS Transport Data Strategy refresh, because that is kind of the wrapper that surrounds all the other great stuff that's going on in the department and outside. So, as most of you will know, we published a Transport Data Strategy last year in the spring. That feels a long time ago now. That was informed by really extensive engagement with the sector. By that I mean the supply chain, academia, SMEs, innovators, data experts, ODIs, those kind of groups, and also councils of various scales. But it was delayed for several years for a number of different reasons, which I'm sure you can remember those days, including a pandemic. And that was about improving discoverability, accessibility, and quality of transport data to support innovation. That was the kind of the big theme. Get the data out there to let the market do its thing. And to focus on the foundations, about getting the things right in terms of the standards to then to build on. That's kind of where we felt we were in the market. Because it took us a few years to get it over the line, for very good reasons, a lot of the stuff was already in progress and business as usual. But pleased to say, progress has been really good. With things like Street Manager, Bus Open Data, Rail Data Marketplace, there's loads of great stuff that's happened and led to really interesting innovations via the market. So it has been a success in a number of ways. So this is based around 5 themes informed by the user research around sharing, discoverability and access, data standards and quality, skills, culture and leadership, user needs and communication, governance, protection, ethics. There's probably nothing too surprising in there, and we think those 5 themes will largely stay as they are in terms of the refresh. We built it around various principles, which I won't go through in detail, but things like making sure their data is safe and secure, the fact that open by default. And we've already done some engagement already at various other events, and we've started to kind of add stuff to that. Again, we think the principles largely hold, but perhaps need some tweaking and some updating. Times have changed, as I'm sure you've noticed. We've already heard this morning about the new government missions. Tech and AI have advanced since we started working on the TDS. And also the profile of AI is a lot more sort of hotter politically. And TDS was published just after the pandemic, so it had that kind of feel about it. There's a lot of stuff there about the lessons learned. There's a lot of more data sharing during that time because it was a national emergency. But we always meant the TDS to be evolving and a living document. So what are we doing? As I've said, lots of areas are probably going to remain the same, but exploring potential new ones. We've recently completed, or the process of completing, a big data discovery to support AI. That looking at kind of all the various data sets that exist out there. There's a long list of 150 plus data sets, and distilling those down into the kind of main ones that could support AI. The key takeaway from that was actually there was nothing there that was surprising, nothing that we kind of missed, nothing lurking behind the data sofa that we found, which was reassuring, but lots of opportunities to do interesting things like with UTMC data, CCTV cameras and mobile phones, all those kind of interesting stuff. Lots of opportunities, lots of complexities. and presentation issues to iron out there. We've also done, because in good civil service style, new government comes in, so we did a data mapping exercise against emissions, all those kind of data sets. How can they support the various different missions the new government's come in with? We've also, if you remember, there was a TSC inquiry into the future of transport data, which was progressing. I think some of you may have provided evidence to that. It's certainly in written form. That paused because of the general election. We don't know if that's ever going to be picked up again, but there's some stuff already that we make use of the evidence, which we'll put online for that. Engagement, really key. That's why I'm here today. Obviously, engagement with my DfT colleagues, the wider DfT family. I think we realised through the TDS1 that we need to work more closely with the agencies. That was kind of perhaps the most, not so negative, but that was the most, in terms of non-positive feedback, was around, there needs to be more on agencies. People outside DfT don't really see a distinction in the agencies and DFTC as much as we do in the centre. We need to work with local authorities, particularly, but also combined authorities, a lot more emphasis on working with the Met mayoral combined authorities. And we're working with Urban Transport Group and TTF on that. Obviously, in SMEs, industry, for groups like this, other government departments, and also we're also doing a discovery with Paula and Dan and colleagues through Elcrig to look at how we deal with data in TTF, and including how we take forward a working group. I'm sure some of you are going to have some questions about that at the end. And also we need to discuss this with all the new ministers. So emerging areas of focus so far is data interoperability. That's really, really keen. We need data interoperability to have integration between places, modes, and systems like energy with transport. You heard a bit this morning about the integrated national transport strategy. Again, data is a key enabler into that, and we've really plugged into that. APIs, I think we just think that's the way we need to go, rather than loads of data lakes, cloning loads of different data sets. These APIs, it's so advantageous in so many different ways. Closer working with the devolved governments and combined authorities, alignment with the pending AI strategy, the AI transport strategy, integration with energy and health. There's a lot more emphasis now on using health data, given one of the missions is around health outcomes. Geography, that's one of the few areas that DfT has actually quite a richness of data it owns, and how we could share that more with the outside world through APIs, etc. A lot of interest in the department at the moment around road and vehicle data. The opportunities there to do interesting things like detecting potholes and stuff. That's a bit of simplification, but as you'll know, but there's so many different things we could do with vehicle data. So that needs to be taken into account. And also needs to reflect the government's priorities around bus and rail reform, bus franchising, all that kind of stuff. And also there's an opportunity to us to showcase the great stuff that's going on within DfT, the wider family, but also in the sector, private and local authorities. The levers largely stay the same, I think, through collaboration, through sharing, new business models, which I think is what we need to develop, but that's actually really tricky. How we use procurement. Do we need to be a bit more prescriptive about kind of what data we want back from the supply chain when we do procurements? I imagine it's the same for local authorities when they do theirs. And also regulation. Possibly this new government will be more likely to regulate than the last one, possibly. So again, where we have made progress before, such as bus open data, that was through regulation. And then the EV charging open data regs come into effect later this month as well. So again, there's where we have done interesting things, it's been or often required regulation. Not always, but often the case. So questions for you. I don't expect you to give me the answers now. I'm happy to have a chat later over a cup of tea. The generic transport data strategy address is there. So do these principles apply still? Anything you think should be added or amended? Are these helpful? Do Do they still hold? Do we still need them? The themes. Do the emerging topics look sensible? Have we missed anything in there? And any general comments would be very welcome. Thank you for listening.
Right, thank you, Matt. Goes without saying that he'd like you to ask those questions, but if you've got your own questions, ask those questions, because you don't get to ask your own questions, Matt. Yeah, I think bear in mind with a subject as big as data, we could all go a bit loopy trying to work out what actually we're talking about, because it's like, how big is space? I don't know. So what I'd suggest we try and do with a subject like this is think about it in terms of what could be useful to you, what can the TTF do. Let's try and kind of narrow it down to some specific questions, maybe some gaps. Is there something that we haven't talked about or even alluded to that we should be? Sorry, there's a few of mine, just lob those in as well. So he's going to be sitting there looking nervous for the next 20 minutes or so. Don't hold back, we're very brave. So, Jess Cobbett's going to come up next and talk about another tiny little subject called AI policy.
It's always fun being technologically inept when you're talking about this subject. So I'm Jess Cobbett. So I work in AI policy and strategy within the road transport group specifically. And so just going to basically talk to you about my area of work and hopefully how, if it provides any reassurance to being able to actually carry out a lot of these really great projects and innovative ideas across industry. So basically, as you'll have heard, there is a pending transport AI strategy and an updating transport data strategy. And these strategies take a ton of work, a ton of investment, and a lot of insight from loads of different stakeholders. But often if they aren't then being coordinated on a kind of working level across the department, they can maybe not get picked up as much, and it really takes a lot of investment in terms of upskilling staff as well within the department, as well as working with stakeholders externally so that these actions don't just get lost. So that's essentially why I exist within RTG, Road Transport Group, as well as my colleague Mike, who's here as well, because there are so many huge applications of AI and emerging technologies that I know you know probably far more than we do about, that really depend on the opportunities within the department so staff need upskilling. It's not to say that staff aren't upskilled within the department, but AI is a very particular subject matter, as is any kind of emerging technology. And you have people like Darren and Anthony and other colleagues and Matt who are and many more, Michaela, you'll hear from soon, who are incredibly knowledgeable in this space and work very closely in this area. But every other policy team that isn't really closely linked to this will miss out on the potential use of AI and emerging technologies across our roads transport group, which is a very broad area. So part of what we do is just kind of talking to teams about what is possible, and getting an understanding from their baseline knowledge of AI and emerging technology. And a big thing we found out is that a lot of teams are actually quite anxious about AI and its application. As I'm sure you all know, there's a ton of kind of conspiracies out there, a lot of fear-mongering and such. And so without the kind of support on a ground level within the department, those opportunities can be missed, which I think is what you end up feeling. Because if central government isn't really understanding this on a policy level, and I'm not saying that people don't understand it through and through, that people are working with it, but there needs to be a cultural change and a shift, and that's what we're working on. And we found that the majority of the people we speak to across the department, or rather the group, are really interested in what AI and emerging technology applications there are within various sectors. And I think that's where you come in. And I think we need to work more closely with the local authorities to get insights into what you're already doing, which I think we've seen from all morning. There's a ton of really interesting, incredibly innovative stuff happening. So how can we share that? How can we learn from it? But also, how can we kind of think about what our role is as a department in terms of enabling this? So that's kind of like the internal side, and I hope that hasn't made you feel nervous about our skill set. There are very knowledgeable people in the department, but this is about a cultural change. In the same way that we kind of originally, I think, was discussing earlier about digitalization a decade ago was something that had to then be brought into like your business as usual conversations. So that's what we're doing internally. And then externally, of course, it's actually then linking all of these various strategies that are really critical and very important, like the data, like the transport AI strategy, and making it make sense in the grand scheme of things. What's central government really focusing on in terms of skills and priorities and how it all links together. And you can't really do that without looking at potential barriers for innovation, which is why I've spoken to a couple of you, and I've spoken to you before at the last TTF conference earlier this year. And what are the barriers and what role can government play in enabling innovation? Because I think that it's all fine and well to say, local authorities deliver a lot, which you absolutely do, and private sector innovates a lot, which it absolutely does. But where is DfT's role in this, and how can we help facilitate that? So these are big existential questions that you might already have been thinking about and want to chat about. But please do talk to us. It's open. That's kind of, I'm hoping, like my role here is, and like our team's role here is thinking about DfT's role a little bit differently and how we've functioned before. So a big thing is, I heard in the last time I was here, I was in the background, which is probably where I should be, and where I just kind of discussed like what are your kind of perceptions of the Department for Transport, and I think a lot of people said that we're very kind of passive or in the background and haven't been as involved in facilitating a lot of innovation, which, whether or not that's true, is something we'd like to change. So that's something that like we'd really like to look at. And there's tons of stuff, as we've seen evidence through what Anthony and Darren and colleagues are doing, that's incredible. But how can we promote that more broadly and even beyond traffic and technology? So one of the things we're looking at is improving our secondments between the private sector and local authorities within central government, which would hopefully be mutually beneficial, because I'm sure there are times where you get frustrated that colleagues maybe don't kind of get the complex and knotty issues. And that's just something we need to do more of and have that shared learning. So that's one of the things. And then another is that we have kind of a focus on AI priorities within RTG. And so you end up, if you're not careful about kind of branching out, you can have some teams that are really incredibly advanced in this area and miss out on opportunities across the piece. So I'm basically asking, and maybe I'll regret this, but for advice and for insights from you and on how we can enable what you're doing and where there are barriers. And we won't be able to necessarily like fix everything, but if we can at least know and understand it on a better level, that would be really helpful. And ultimately, it's about knowledge sharing. And I know that's basically like the purpose of this entire forum is how can you share knowledge? How can you have it so that we're not all starting from scratch? And these forums are incredibly important. But in the meantime, where we can't always just go travel across the country and in some cases the world, how can you share that information? And is there something the department can be doing better to enable your really incredibly innovative stuff? So, and as Matt says, that the levers or levers, sorry, I lived in America for a while, I panic on that word, whatever it is, haven't really changed, but that really sits with us, right? So it's like the risk, the responsibility, and the levers or leverage sit in different areas. how can we think about that differently, and how can we make sure that, you know, we're helping enable? And I think that's really about a culture change, not only within the department, which we're chipping away at slowly, but externally, and how you perceive the department and how we can better support and work with you. So I'll probably stop rambling there, probably being the key word, because I can't read my notes. But yeah, over here, I'll do this little clicker thing. So yeah, please do reach out. I'm Jess Cobbett, and yeah, any feedback you have, any insights. We're doing a lot of research ourselves. We're doing a lot of kind of partnering with universities and stuff. There's just generally, like, whether or not I should be very open for thinking about how we can do things differently, so that innovation isn't something we have to kind of pitch. It's something that becomes like part of our BAU fabric of how we function and really promote and protect. So thank you very much.
Right, thank you very much. Again, you know, very broad subject. You might want to think about it maybe from your point of view. Examples you can think of where you're getting interested in AI, seeing it work. Let me just give you kind of one thought. That one of the use cases we've got that we're thinking about inside the department, just for ourselves, and I'm sure this resonates with lots of colleagues in the public sector, is around managing consultations. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about, you know, community engagement over low traffic neighbourhoods. It sounds easy to do, maybe it doesn't, but it certainly isn't easy to do. And consulting the public on as we develop policy is really, really difficult. So you know, when we get thousands and thousands and thousands of people writing to us and writing long kind of essays about what they think about what the questions we're asking, actually having better tools for being able to kind of process that and analyse them quickly and accurately is clearly an opportunity for AI. So that's something that we're looking at doing. Now, that's a very small scale kind of bureaucrats kind of use case for AI and, you know, advanced sort of data manipulation and analysis, but it's actually a very real world one, because it means that we save the taxpayer money by getting the job done faster. So there may be practical examples like that, whether you're looking inwards or looking across the sector that we're talking about. So anyway, just have a think about that so when we get to the kind of panel discussion. One thing I would say is that the head of the group that we sit in, which looks after all roads policy in the department, is very interested in this, and that's an opportunity. And I don't think ministers are going to lose interest in something like AI, because they're all going to want to keep up with what everyone else in government is doing and saying. So we're very keen to stay at the front of the pack. Right, I'm going to call on Michaela now to come up. I don't know what she's going to talk about. That's part of the fun of doing this. So I'll let her tell you herself.
Hi, so I'm Michaela Nelson and I sit in our Science, Innovation and Technology division of the DfT, and I'm Head of Future Telecoms and Digital Connectivity. So I'm just here to tell you a little bit about some of the work that I've been doing over the past year. So I'm going to be talking about a telecoms vision and strategy. So about this time last year, the National Infrastructure Commission published their second National Infrastructure Assessment. There was a whole section on transport, but hidden away in the data and digital section was a recommendation for transport to look at the telecommunication needs of the UK's transport network. So it was asking government to consider developing a strategy to ensure that the correct infrastructure was in place on the transport network. They want the strategy by 2026 to deliver infrastructure on the network by 2035. So it was quite a big ask, really. They want us to look at different methods of network deployment, whether infrastructure could be shared between different sectors, whether we have adequate access to spectrum. They want clear responsibilities within government for delivering telecoms, and they want us to consider whether networks can meet specific public policy goals, for example, improving passenger connectivity on the rail network. So as you probably are all aware, transport is done very, very modally. So in DfT, we're kind of split into aviation, maritime, rail and road. So science, innovation and technology obviously sits across. It's a non-modal division that I sit in. But really, we've got a situation for transport telecoms where Network Rail deliver the telecoms that are needed for the railways. On the strategic road network, you've got national highways that do the communications required for that. You've got the CAA and the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency that look at the sort of safety critical communications in those sectors. You've got 150, 160 different local highways authorities that do the communications for local road networks in England. And you've got ports and airports, which are private businesses in their own right, and what they do for their communications is really up to them. So it's it's a very sort of modally split, and there's lots of different stakeholders that we need to consider. So one of the things that I've been working on is actually trying to bring all of these different stakeholders. It's not possible to bring all of them together, but to bring a wide enough selection of them together to bring everybody onto the same page and to develop a vision for what we would like transport telecoms to look like by 2035 so that we know what we're aiming for. So We've done some horizon scanning as part of that, and we've had a visioning workshop with a range of different stakeholders from all of those different organisations that I mentioned previously to create a shared vision with cross-modal support. So this is kind of the structure of the workshop. We did some horizon scanning. We looked at sort of hopes and fears and value statements. We created a vision using breakout groups focusing on what our purpose was, what the goals were, what strategic actions we may need to develop, and what are our capabilities. So finishing up then, we looked at sort of what are our hazards and headlights, what things are we, really excited about, what things are we worried about, and we've put all of that together, and this is hot off the press. It's still in draft, but I'm able to share some of it with you today. We've developed a vision, so it's actually on the next slide, sorry. The strategy will come after the vision. So the vision still needs to be run by directors and the chief scientific advisor. And what we do with it next, whether we develop a standalone strategy like the transport AI strategy and the transport data strategy, or whether the kind of telecom strategy sits within a wider departmental or government strategy. So you've got it's already been introduced here this morning, I think, the integrated national transport strategy. It could play a part in that, or perhaps even in the government's industrial strategy. So what comes after the vision is still up for debate. But this is what this is the draft vision that we have at the moment. So we want digital connectivity to seamlessly integrate the transport network, inform better decisions for passengers and operators while enabling the diffusion and adoption of new technology. And round that draft vision statement, we have got the aims or the goals of this vision. So digital connectivity should support greener transport. It should be cross-modal. It should support economic growth and enhance safety on the network. It should be secure. It should support social mobility. It should support innovation and the integration of new technologies. And it should underpin the transport network and improve the resilience of the transport network. So those are our kind of underpinning aims of this vision. So really a question for people today here is, have we missed any key goals? Is there something that you think really ought to be included in that transport vision that we haven't included here? So, do come and find me afterwards if you think there is something missing from this. And again, I'm under no illusions. This is a really big piece of work. Digital connectivity is so ubiquitous to us. We all expect it. We all need it. And the demand for digital connectivity on the transport network is only going to grow. So there are a lot of challenges here. Some of the key ones, funding, it comes up everywhere, is always going to be a key challenge. It's a very large network geographically. It's an actually, really big problem to solve. We're going to need cross-modal and cross-government collaboration on this. Spectrum is a finite resource, so that is going to be a challenge. In order to get mobile network operators to invest, we need to prove that there's a business case for them. So that again is going to be another challenge. And the technology develops much faster than government policy or strategy. So the railways are planning to put in a 5G system called FRMCS. They're looking at implementing that from 2030 onwards. We will be well and truly into 6G by the time they're even putting any infrastructure in the network. We know that these things take time, but we can't let that stop us from moving forward, just being scared that we're going to perhaps back the wrong horse or install the wrong technology. We have to be thinking forward thinking and ensuring that where possible our technology is upgradable. And then just public perception is another one. But really, what are the key challenges that you see in developing a strategy for transport telecoms? And wherever the strategy falls, whether it will be within part of wider government strategy or as a strategy in and of itself, we will be engaging really, really widely with stakeholders. So there will be opportunities to feed into this in the future. And then just on talking about new technology and technology that might be on the network in 2035, one of the other things that I've been looking at is what are the impacts of removing old technology from the network. So PSTN migration is something that I've looked at over the past year or so. And it's just a flag to everyone that the telecoms modernisation team at DSIT are almost ready to publish guidelines for local authorities on PSTN migration. There'll be a traffic management section, and I'm sure that we can get LCRIG to make sure that you're all aware when that actually does get published. And then finally, I just wanted to do a little plug for our transport research and innovation grants. We've supported a lot of innovative research in AI, on data, on connectivity. These are small chunks of funding for proof of concept projects, and it's supported by the Connected Places Catapult. We're going to be moving to 2 rounds of funding for each year, and our most recent batch has just started. So if you've got an innovative idea, a lot of you here I'm sure are already aware of our TRIG grants. I know that there are people in here that have received TRIG funding in the past, but it's a great opportunity for to get a small amount of funding to do some proof of concept work, and I'd really encourage anyone who's not familiar with TRIG to have a look at that. But yeah, come and talk to me about what you think are the challenges and the aims of transport telecom strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michaela. So again, just to plant some seeds for the last part of the session, it strikes me that there's maybe some common questions that are relevant to all of these very, very big, hard to manage kind of areas of work because they're vast, they're not just transport related, they're quite difficult to kind of break down into components that you can actually deal with. So I think there's a challenge there about, so what are the kind of near term, to use the cliche, the low-hanging fruit, what's the sort of stuff that we could be doing? Because that's where TTF needs to get busy, because we're not going to solve the nagging problems about what to do about all data and all AI and all telecoms. But there are very specific things that you do that require answers to those questions. So the more that we can sort of break it down into kind of workable chunks, the better, really. So maybe if you could kind of think about that. That might be a good way into some questions. Anyway, last but not least, Louise is going to come up. Louise is a colleague from DSIT, and she may start by telling you what that stands for. You can probably guess. Louise.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I'm from DSIT, which is the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. I'm in the Digital Infrastructure Directorate, so colleagues of mine are in the modernisation team that Michaela was talking about. Our directorate used to be in DCMS, so some of the projects we've sort of supported in the past were under the banner of DCMS. So our aim in the Digital Infrastructure Directorate, and I'm head of wireless infrastructure strategy specifically, but not exclusively. We try and ensure that that supply of digital connectivity in the market meets demand. I know you will all tell me that it doesn't always. And we support the industry to invest, and we try and help the private sector and the public sector to work with telecoms providers and to have that sort of supply and demand relationship. We are, in 2023, we set an ambition for standalone 5G to go to all populated areas by 2030. The reason for that is that's the sort of stage of 5G which will deliver the features of 5G that have been much hyped for many years, so that will support kind of mission critical levels of reliability and will support millions of connected devices and so on. So this is not a target as such. It's not a government-funded project like the superfast broadband and fibre broadband and so on was, but we are supporting the industry to deliver that. And we think it's an important foundational ambition to get standalone 5G out to as much of the country as possible to support applications and uses that may come along between now and 2030, many of which might be transport applications. So Ofcom at the moment are reporting that geographic coverage is almost at 95%. Some of you may scoff at this. We note that Ofcom's coverage reporting doesn't always reflect consumer and business experience of using mobile networks. We have been urging them to take a look at the way they report data and measure coverage data so that it is a bit more reflective of experience. They could do that by looking at their sort of thresholds for, at the moment they look at signal strength, and it may be that they've set the bar for that a little bit too low. We are also keen for them to try and incorporate crowdsourced data more. And I know that a lot of local authorities are, I know this vexes many of you greatly, and rightly so, and that you're thinking of ways in which you can improve knowledge about the extent of digital connectivity, in particular mobile connectivity in your areas. And you're looking at your own measurement schemes, for example, involving putting equipment on bin lorries and so on. And we're very keen to sort of think about those schemes and think about how data gathered locally can become part of the national picture, because to some extent you do have to zoom in. I mean, figures like 95% coverage nationwide aren't particularly helpful, especially if we're going to need to drill down into the detail of whether a road is or isn't covered. We're going to need quite localized coverage maps. So we're very much thinking about how we can zoom into that data and make that data more accurate. So over the years, we've been involved in quite a few trials and programs looking at how 5G and other forms of digital connectivity can help in transport applications. A few years ago, Manchester introduced a smart junctions program involving sensors and 5G small cells to improve traffic signal efficiency. And we also worked on a project called 5G Connected and Automated Logistics, which involves Sunderland City Council and the Nissan plant looking at autonomous HGVs on essentially private roads around the Nissan plant. And we now have a 5G Innovation Regions programme where we're working with 10 large regional areas, and a couple of those projects are involving road-based schemes. So Manchester are using 5G to provide a digital road network. They're looking at reducing congestion and carbon emissions and prioritising traffic flows, for example, public transport, more efficiently. And they're hoping to develop from that a scalable case for investment that could be replicated elsewhere. And in Belfast, they're working with Translink, a bus operator. They've got a thick 5G private network across the harbour area, which covers more than the harbour area, quite a wide area. And they're looking at smart bus stops and connected buses and so on. So we know there's a case for improving connectivity on the roads. I mean, I haven't mentioned EV charging infrastructure, but we are very cognizant of the need for good connectivity for that as but one reason. I don't, and you know, this links with the work that Michaela's doing. The case for reliable connectivity on roads hasn't yet been made or articulated to government, or at least to DSIT. So we're trying to pull in all of from various different groups articulations of that demand, so that we can understand the nature of the requirement. Working with colleagues in DfT, working with National Highways, working with the there's an organisation called UK-TIN, UK Telecoms Innovation Network, and that has a transport and logistics working group that we support, and they have also been investigating and articulating what they see as the requirements. And we've been working with the Automotive Council to provide a set of requirements. They set the exam question of what is the minimum viable digital infrastructure or level of connectivity to enable large-scale connected and automated mobility in the UK. So we hope that by the end of this year or soon after, we will be able to articulate that requirement, and then we can start considering the best ways that we can work with the private sector and the public sector to think about solutions to meet that demand. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay. Hopefully you've got some questions stored up. Feels to me like we're talking about data, we're talking about, you know, supercomputers, machine learning, we're talking about connectivity, mobile phone networks, big subjects. Personally, I get my head around the twirling cone when you press the button to cross a road, because if you're visually impaired, how do you know you can cross the road? Well, you feel the twirling cone. I can make sense of that. So I suppose one of the challenges we've got to try and do is how do you go from this big mega strategy topics, and how do you kind of, as I said earlier, how do you kind of break them down into some specific things that we could potentially, through TTF, we could contribute to in terms of identifying maybe kind of some examples of where there's a particularly good use case or a particular challenge that we're going to be prevented from doing what we're doing if it doesn't get solved. Those are the sorts of things where I think colleagues would really welcome input. I suspect we know a lot of what those things are, but it doesn't mean to say we've got answers to them. And that will vary depending on the subject matter. So I've got a few equally difficult to answer questions, but does anybody in the auditorium have anything that has been spurred by our presenters? There's a gentleman here in the second row.
Yeah, hi. Stuart Braybrook from Standby. A question to Louise and Michaela, really, regarding emergency services networks. Do you get involved in that at all?
So, yeah, short answer is no, not involved, but we are sort of alongside and aware of the work that is going on, but not directly involved, no.
It's a Home Office programme.
Okay, all right.
But as Michaela says, we're sort of peripherally aware.
All right, thank you.
And as we know, there are people in this room, no names, no pack drill, who are getting very interested in working in that sort of area. And that's exactly part of the problem, is that you need to bring in other policy areas and interests, which is always a bit of a challenge in government. But it's a good question to ask, because these are exactly the sort of connections that I think when you're looking at it from the outside, you can make. And if we're not making them or we're not making them well enough, then, you know, that's our bad, and we should do something about it. At the back.
Hello, I'm Lyndon from Edinburgh Council. My question is about the funding side of it as much as anything else. I've been in the industry for 25 years and various other government type industries before that. But one thing I noticed from starting in this industry, there was a standard communication network being used for urban transport networks with point-to-point copper lines, which we knew even within a quarter of a second that line had gone down, and the impact to the network not being able to produce accurate scoot counts, etc. The communication companies have basically push the prices of that particular technology out of our price range. We've had to move on to broadband and cellular communications, where we often play second part to the house dweller in the sense that we tend to be paying more for our lines on street, but getting considerably less quality to the equipment, so we're not able to have accurate data, and it's kind of this where we need Ofcom's support via yourselves that we will have a cost-effective network which is fit for purpose. And it's sort of, I'm hoping that it sounds like you're all kind of involved in the same thing. It's making sure we can deliver the technology that's being manufactured, but we're not able to use because of the communication platform that we need.
Well, I can speak to that a little bit. So what you get at the moment is a sort of best effort on behalf of the mobile network operators, and that could be impacted by however many other users are on the network at any given time. One of the benefits as we move away from 2G, 3G, 4G towards newer technologies like 5G is that 5G wasn't developed for the needs of individual consumers. 5G has been developed particularly for vertical industries like healthcare, like transport, like manufacturing. And it has the ability to actually slice parts of a network to give a dedicated quality of service to particular use cases. So as we move into a UK that has 5G standalone networks as consumers, not individual consumers, but businesses and other industries can expect to be able to negotiate those sort of particular quality of service elements that you need. And if there's enough of us able to articulate those needs, then we will be able to bring that cost down because we are providing, it's rather than just like one or two individuals needing a lot, it'll be specific use cases, and we should be able to get that investment from mobile network operators to support that. So really, I think that sort of best effort that we get at the moment, we would expect to be able to see dedicated quality of service as we move towards 5G networks.
But one of the challenges, one of the things we're trying to get authorities to think about is if they're going to buy a business grade quality chunk of connectivity, they need to think across departments, because it might be that the solution is too expensive for just the highways team. So we're, through our 5G Innovation Regions programme, we're trying to help places to build a business case so that they can put their housing need and their education need and their social care need, as well as their highways need, into a case for a sort of spend to save business case.
I guess this is a good example of where there's there's lots of detailed examples of kind of what it feels like at the sharp end. Do all of those add up to what's happening at the strategic level? And if there's a mismatch, that's where we get questions like that coming from.
Is this on? Yeah. Tim Ray from CAPS Trafficom. Great conversation about telecoms, but a lot of these conversations are often around the negative business case, in so much as, something's going to be switched off. How do we react to that? How do we keep the show on the road? Is there any examples, and I say this because you may, certainly from the commercial colleagues like myself in the room, you may get our attention more, if you like. Is there any examples of more positive business cases? Not problems to be fixed, but we do this now, it works, but if we invested in this way, it would work an awful lot better for the greater good, etc. So is there, I mean, I guess it's a question for you, Louise, but perhaps from the wider board as well, that would be really great.
Well, our belief is that if you invest in modern technology and digitalise public services, you absolutely can take a chunk off the bottom line in the budget for those services, and then there are all the externalities of the growth agenda, and this is the huge challenge for us all collectively, is to make that case to Treasury, to look across and see the overall gains for productivity and growth and so on. And obviously it's quite challenging to make that case. But in some of those departmental areas of local authorities, it might be more clear. I mean, obviously nationwide, the health secretary has a plan and is working very closely with our Secretary of State, to incorporate the way that data is used into the NHS. Not an easy task, and not something that is done overnight. So it's all like a giant Jenga puzzle, really.
There's an image for you. And I'd love to play a gigantic game of Jenga. I'd also wish I hadn't just bitten down on a peppercorn. I was going to ask one question at the end, but I had one thing I just wanted to kind of play back to you that Louise said earlier, and sorry to kind of be picking on this end of the panel. I'm coming to you. You said the case for connectivity is not being made. I'm surprised Andy didn't charge down the stairs and throw himself on the stage. Does anybody want to kind of respond to that? Because it'd be good to know how we can make sure that the case for connectivity is made, because that feels pretty important to a lot of the stuff we're doing. I don't know whether you want to kind of elaborate on.
Did you say Andy?
Yeah,
Andy,
he's the head of our
I've
connected vehicles.
spoken to Andy and he has made the case.
He's assaulted you already, right?
Yeah,
Excellent,
he has,
right.
He has fed
Metaphorically.
into that piece of work, so yeah.
Good. Nothing you wish to add at this point, have you?
Yeah. We're just,
No.
we're just getting it written down. That's the next.
But you see, this is why these connections are important, because if someone from government is saying the case for connectivity is not being made, then we're further down the hill than maybe we thought we were.
Yeah.
So it's really important that we can.
People like Andy get it, but it needs to be like written down by sort of organisational people who can then write a letter to the government.
Correct. How you deliver the message is important. There's another question down the front here. 2 questions. Darren, can you mediate as to who was first? No idea.
I'll speak to the Welsh Government.
Dear Dana, Welsh Government. So obviously all the employees on the stage are English Government, DfT, civil servants, Westminster. What are we doing to make sure that transport, the journey from Land's End to John O'Groats via Bangor, it all fits in? You know, there are 10 million other people other than those represented by those on the stage. There are 56 other highway authorities, 3 devolved administrations. You talk about your ministers, you talk about your government, you talk about your, the money. It's all DfT, it's all very English-centric. But in order, we are the United Kingdom. We are slowly becoming a disunited kingdom because of the way everything is being divided up. So what are we doing to make sure that that journey becomes seamless right across the UK and we don't just focus and become very narrow around certain parts of the UK?
Well, that's
open to anybody.
Question. Are there any examples from any of the strategies we're developing?
I did mention Belfast.
Okay, well, there's a start. Is there anything else we could kind of touch on as examples of how we are trying to kind of reach across borders?
Well, I'd just make the case that having real-time data is going to be key to better integrating our transport network, whether that's across the West Midlands or across the United Kingdom as a whole. We can't do that unless we know where things are and how long it's going to take them to get to where they're going. Unless we can supply that information to passengers and to operators, we're going to really struggle to improve integration across any transport network. So I think that, digital connectivity and data will be really key to that.
Yeah, thanks, Michaela. And I'll just shout.
It's on.
It is on. Data interoperability is really key as well. Making sure there's the right standards, ontologies, so there's interconnectivity between modes and also places. That's key to joining things up.
Yeah, so some of it's at the foundational level, but it's a fair challenge. I mean, yes, TTF is essentially a sort of English-facing organisation, but certainly through Streetwise and other things that Darren gets involved in, we do reach across borders, and it's obviously very important from a DfT point of view. Connectivity in the sense of union connectivity is important. So if we're giving the impression that we're just focused only on what's good for England and what's going to work in England, that's absolutely not the case. And I'm glad you're here and I'm glad you made that point.
Also, if transport might be devolved, but telecoms isn't, and we work with, I was on the phone to one of your colleagues in Welsh Government last week, hearing about a very exciting trial providing connectivity on buses in the middle of nowhere in Wales in a complete not spot. No, we absolutely, our telecoms policy goes to all corners of the UK.
Right, we have another question there.
Hiya, it's Ian Large from Blackpool Council. It's an AI question. So much as the example you gave earlier, we're using AI around our CMS customer inquiries, getting it to trog through our policies to come up with answers and narrow things down. It's just better, more efficient, better officer time. Going to make a portal for elected members so they can quiz things. That's a project we've got running now. But from a transport perspective, a wider perspective, where should we be thinking about AI? Where is it going to bring the most benefit? And now, next, in the future.
This is working. Yeah. It's a really good question, and really, it's kind of like, I think the thing is, it's like not using AI for the sake of AI, right? It's where does it make sense? And I think that there's really, I don't know that it's really necessarily for the department to tell you what you should use it and how you should apply it. But ultimately, you know, it can be either kind of like internally, a lot of councils, as kind of Anthony had even said, there's a ton of applications for AI that can be used for efficiencies within in your organizations to like make really arduous processes a lot smoother and easier, and especially when you're trying to do anything in terms of like working with constituents and understanding big data sets. And then there's, yeah, I mean, honestly, it's endless. You can there's tons of examples of how you can use it in terms of traffic management, predictive applications in that sense. There's also, you know, I think I should say that although there's discussion around AI, it's kind of emerging technologies more broadly, and kind of how you can. I know that there are organisations that are looking at using and applying AI and robotics to picking up litter, for instance, in areas that are incredibly dangerous on highways and stuff, that there are really difficult places to get to. So I guess it's like, really, it's an open-ended thing. It's whatever would make sense, but really it's like, how can you apply it where other technologies aren't kind of hitting it? So, and if that's something we can do in terms of sharing use cases, then that would be helpful, and kind of see how other councils are doing it, then that's something we can do as well. And I know that TTF has done before.
Can I just ask one further question? So we're using AI, a particular sort of AI. So I went to my wonderful IT people. There seems to be quite a bit of nervousness around AI and what you let it have access to. Is that something that you're aware of, or you've found that there's a nervousness because it's extremely clever? It's almost limitless, isn't it, what it can do?
Yeah.
That there's a bit of hesitancy for my IT guys about what it could see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what I was inarticulately trying to say earlier, is that there has to be a bit of a culture shift internally as well, right? But it's difficult when there's so much fear-mongering around AI, and there are a lot of monopolies in this space that kind of dominate the discussion and can make it seem like quite scary. But I think it's something we very much acknowledge with the department and across government, which is why there are quite a lot of extensive guidelines that have been put out. I know the CDDO has guidance on using and implementing AI internally. And so I think it's acknowledging the fear there, but applying it where it only makes sense, and then also having kind of following the right kind of principles, like having human oversight and so on and so forth, and acknowledging how powerful it can be, but it's ultimately limited to the data that it's being built on and the algorithms and so on. So I think it doesn't help to just say it's going to be solve everything, but it has a lot of potential.
And I'd just encourage you, if you have a bright idea that you'd like to test, check out the Transport Research and Innovation grants, because that's a really good way of actually building some proof of concept.
Right, it's better be the last question, I'm afraid. Paul?
Paul Darlow at Portsmouth City Council. 1 point and 1 question. I think in terms of connectivity, certainly we've done some trials with some industry colleagues here looking at things like mobile hazards, which worked really well when there was connectivity and didn't work at all when there was no connectivity. Those hazards just disappeared. So that's the first point, which might add some weight to your arguments. Secondly, if data is the fuel that powers our systems and tools to deliver better services, I think we've just heard there's a whole host of issues bubbling around at the moment. What defined space can we collaborate with you and with each other to deal with these things?
Right, so as part of the refresh of the transport data strategy, there is going to be a engagement with yourselves. I'm here today. We've been at other conferences. Also, LCRIG are going to be doing a discovery for us, looking at how we take into account data in TTF, and that's going to feed into the refresh. It's also going to look at what we do about our working group and how we can communicate with the members on data It's also going to explore how we can maximise the benefits of the online, the TTF data web space. We've already put some links on there, but actually how can we make that more interactive, update those links, more of a narrative around those links. We're also looking internally at DfT about how we do governance around data. There's a lot to think about in this space, so happy to have a conversation afterwards with any ideas you may have. But it's something we're totally aware of. We have to balance that with the resource we've got as well. That, you know, you can spend a lot of time talking with the sector about this stuff, but actually that does take, it's important, but it takes time. So we've got to balance it with everything else that's going on. So interested in your views and that of your colleagues in the room.
Thanks, Matt. I was going to end by just asking Matt to kind of offer his version of a rallying cry about the data group. You've kind of done it because you've explained what the kind of next immediate things we're doing now to think about the TTF data group.
Just to add to that, as part of that discovery, there's going to be, I think it's 2 sessions with TTF members to input into the strategy, but also into what we do with the website and also the data working group going forward. So there's going to be a couple of opportunities there. But thank you for your question.
Yeah, because I think it's a real opportunity to kind of get to the crunchy stuff. If we can engage with that and get the TTF data group doing something that it's going to be good at and where it's got the specialism, because that's where it can really add value. Right, okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next session, so if I can ask you to thank the panellists and we'll move on. Thank you.